Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again today. Today's session is the first part of Realities of Reentry. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Carolyn Harper, who is our coffee consulting coach and project manager. And I'm going to say a few words. Carolyn is currently a consultant and project manager, and she provides technical assistance to us and training for the Department of Labor. Before working for Coffee, she was the chief of staff for the public safety for the city of Philadelphia under Mayor Nutter for 5 years. And in this capacity, she developed and implemented strategic alliances and partnerships in public, private, and nonprofit sectors throughout the city. So I'm going to let Carolyn take it over from here. And if you'd like to say a few more words about your work, please feel free to do so. Thanks, Carolyn, for doing this for us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody, and I'm happy to be here. So today I want to talk about just the reentry from a basic standpoint, what the reality of reentry is all about, and from a higher level and a programmatic level. And then tomorrow, I want to talk about the strategies in terms of working inside the prison and what will that take and how does that look different than what you may have done in the past and running reentry programs on the outside. So that's my goal for today. My background, in addition to working for Mayor Nutter as chief of staff, public safety, which included police, fire, prisons, and reentry. Prior to that, I worked for Public-Private Ventures, who was the initial social research firm that created what was called Ready for Work, and was a research and demonstration project with the Department of Labor, the Department of Justice, and Annie Casey Foundation, and became the impetus for President Bush's President Reentry Initiative, and then the Second Chance Act. We'll talk about that as well. But it laid the groundwork for what it is that you're seeing. So I've been doing work with reentry, people that are incarcerated, Amachi, mentoring children of prisoners now for over 18 years. Never thought I would do this, came from corporate America, but this is where I was led, and I'm happy to be in this role. And so with that, our objectives for today is to talk about reentry from a, like I said, a 101 standpoint. Some of you may have more experience, and so this will be a refresher. For others, it may be something new, but I am hoping that as we go through this, by the end of the presentation, each of you have been able to take away one thing that you've learned from today's presentation, and one thing that you'll think about and perhaps think about in a different way. So we'll go through the legislative impact of criminal justice reform, evidence-based practices, and more importantly, evidence-based research. We'll talk about some facts. We'll talk about what the reality of reentry looks like, and what's the program design that you have come up with to do this work. The program design incorporating the Department of Labor's requirements, the client, essential program elements, and organization, your organization, and then what your next steps are. We'll look at it from a different perspective of reentry, and hopefully a more realistic perspective of reentry slide. And the first slide is a quote from Bryan Stevenson. And hopefully every one of you have heard of Bryan Stevenson. He's the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama. He is also the author of the book, Just Mercy. His story is a phenomenal story in how he changed the justice system and starting in Alabama in terms of individuals that were sentenced to the death penalty, and how he uncovered the disparities in how people of color were being put to death, even though they did not receive a fair trial. And so Bryan Stevenson has this quote that each of us is more than the worst thing that we've ever done. And if we all think about the worst thing that we've ever done, I think that we would come to know that we've all done some things that we are probably not proud of. We've all done some things that if someone hadn't intervened, we might have gone a different path. We have also done some things that narrowly kept us from not only life-altering activities, but some of the worst things that we could think of that we've done may have impacted other people as well. And so Brian Stevenson is reminding us that we are more than the worst thing that we've ever done. And fortunately for us, we have the opportunity to share and to serve others who made those mistakes, or what was classified as mistakes, and then had to pay the penalty by being incarcerated. So I want to get started by asking everyone, this is what mass incarceration looks like. And I want to ask, how many of you have been in a prison on the unit, not in the reception area, not in the commissioner's office or the warden's office? How many of you have actually been in the facility? And if you could, I see one person raise their hand. Anybody else? About?
Somewhere between, it looks like around 5 or
Okay.
6.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. I'm glad that you said that. So because now we're going to go to an activity. All right. I want you all to think about, before you were doing this work, or even those that have never been in a prison, that maybe this is going to be part of your main goal, is type in one thing that you need to unlearn about the population, about the prison population, based on prior knowledge, prior to what you're doing right now, or even what you might be thinking about right now. If you could just type in the chat box, one thing that you need to unlearn.
So we have some answers coming in. Marvin saying not everyone is guilty.
Good.
Iviana saying the stigmas that have been associated with returning citizens based on society. That the majority of people that are in there are violent, uneducated, persons of color, etc. That's from Donnell Brown.
All good stuff.
All good stuff.
Anyone
Anything
else?
We have Aria sharing that judging individuals based on the severity of their charges is something to unlearn. Christina saying treating everyone the same way.
Okay. This is excellent.
We have understanding trauma and how critical it is to people being incarcerated. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And also Christopher sharing that everyone doesn't think the way I think.
That's an excellent one. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. Everyone doesn't think the way that we think. Well, thank you for sharing and for your honesty, because it is really important. All of us have biases. And one of the things that we have to recognize is that we have some implicit biases against individuals that have committed a crime or have been accused of committing a crime, who have been arrested, those that have been arrested, those that are convicted. And if we are honest with ourselves, one of the ways that we can best do the work that we do is to make sure that we admit the things that, the biases that we have against it. Individuals are lazy, individuals that are incarcerated are uneducated, individuals that are incarcerated don't want to do anything but live a life of crime. If you watch the news at 11 o'clock and you see a report of some type of violence, then it changes your mindset that everybody that is in prison are violent, are want to take from each other, drug users, drug sellers, drug traffickers. If you listen to the news, you think that everybody is a murderer, because that's what's presented, that sensational journalism. And so those are the things that form the thoughts in people's minds. And it's really important that you keep that in mind, because as you go out to work with the community and as you go out to work with individuals that are going to be your partners, that you are looking to find jobs with, you're looking to work with so that these individuals can be placed in jobs, those are the things that are in their mind. So you have to be able to deal with it from your perspective so that you can translate that for them. Because in their mind, they're not the ones that are going in prison. They're not the ones that put together a reentry program. They're the ones that are hearing and seeing the things that are on the news. So if you think of current situations, in the protesting that was taking place with George Floyd, the peaceful protests and the concerns and the demands for equal justice was buried behind those individuals that sought to riot and loot with social unrest. And so that's what colors people's minds, are the things that they see and that are highlighted. And this is will be part of your challenge, because now you're working with people that are in prison. And now you're working with people that have served longer sentences. So you'll be working with people that it's not about driving under the influence. It could be about murder. It could be about manslaughter. It could be around armed robbery or burglary. So what you need to unlearn, I appreciate everybody sharing that, because you're right. Everyone doesn't, I don't know who said it, but everyone does not think like you think. And so how do you have that conversation with someone whose mind is already made up that these are evil people? Also that, the majority of people that are incarcerated, people believe that they're all people of color, and people are already prejudged. So as we go through this, when we talk about program design, I want you to keep that in mind, because that will impact the individuals that you're going to work with on a regular basis. So where does this go from here? So let's talk about some of the federal legislation that came about. President Bush, as I said, started the Prisoner Reentry Initiative. And out of the Prisoner Reentry Initiative came the 2008 Second Chance Act. It really was 2007. And under this Second Chance Act, it was the federal government allowed grants for vital programs and system reforms in the prison system. The Second Chance Act supported state and local, I'm not going to read all this, but they supported state, local, tribal government, and nonprofit agencies. This was the first time, and also faith-based agencies, that the federal government were partnering with other entities besides governmental entities to work on what prison reform looked like to reduce recidivism and improve outcomes. Now, I want to make sure that everybody understands the purpose for this was not because the hearts of the people in the federal government got softened. The purpose for this was monetarily. It was an economic approach to reducing state budgets for the cost of prison in the states, and the large percentage of the state budget that went to prison, keeping people incarcerated. And so it was started out of, and with Senator Specter, who was a Democrat from Pennsylvania, started thinking about this back in 2004, 2005. It got defeated in Congress. And so they did this research demonstration called Ready for Work. The demonstration proved very, very successful. And again, it was initially started out for the state budget. It wound up being part of prison reform in the sense that these programs would be allowed to work with prisoners and those that were coming out. In 2010, the Fair Sentencing Act was proposed and passed by Congress under President Obama. And the main focus for the 2010 Fair Sentencing Act was to reduce the disparity in sentencing, particularly drug-related offenses. It expanded the Second Chance Act, and it eliminated the mandatory minimums for simple possession of crack cocaine. Prior to the Fair Sentencing Act, an individual with minor possession of crack cocaine got a higher sentence than someone that was doing powder cocaine, straight cocaine, or the white collar cocaine versus in the neighborhood nickel bag of crack cocaine. And so it eliminated the mandatory minimums that judges were placed to sentence individuals with based on crack cocaine. And it also, this was really big, was it also eliminated private corporations from operating federal prisons. So if you build a prison, you had to fill the prison, and private corporations were getting into building and operating federal prisons. And it was a moneymaker for them. Again, we're going back to the economics of prison. Once you stop the economics of prison, you will see a reduction in the prison population. So again, under the Fair Sentencing Act, it eliminated that. And so private corporations were not allowed to operate federal prisons under this Fair Sentencing Act. In 2019, President Trump did the First Step Act. The First Step Act only applies to federal offenses that occurred after 1987. And what it is like you can earn good time credit, maximum of 54 days can come off of your sentence based on you participating in an approved program that would reduce recidivism and provide job readiness training. Now, the difference with this act and the other previous acts, this only applies to federal offenses. Doesn't apply to state prisons, doesn't apply to local prisons or local jails. It excludes major drug trafficking offenses like methamphetamine, fentanyl. Any drug offense related to that is excluded from the First Step. And it also, one of the main things was it reinstated private corporations' abilities to operate federal prisons. And that has probably been the most successful part, if you want to call it successful part of the First Step Act, is that those private corporations immediately got refunded to operate federal prisons, including the prisons that are along the border of Mexico with individuals coming into the country. And it also eliminated the use of restraints on pregnant inmates during labor. So when a woman goes into labor while she's in prison, they will not have a handcuff to the bed. It eliminated juveniles in solitary confinement if they were in federal prisons. Understand that juveniles do not go to federal prisons. So while it looked good on paper and it got a lot of press, if you dug deeper, it identified that juveniles do not go to federal prisons. So as I said, it eliminates juveniles going into solitary confinement if they were in a federal prison. All right, so let's talk about some evidence-based research. We all know that people recidivate. And 66%, 2 out of 3 from state and local prisons will recidivate and return within 3 years of release. 45% of those from federal prison, which means that that's a longer sentence, will return to prison within 5 years of release. Now think about this. So based on this research, I have 6 nephews. Let me take it back. I have 5 nephews and 1 niece that was born in 2001. Based on this statistic, this is true, 2 of the 5 will be incarcerated in their lifetime based on evidence-based research. And that is taken from the statistics that is happening right now. Can you imagine sitting at your Thanksgiving table with 2 individuals missing just because they were men of color? This is what we're living in right now. And so the work that you're doing is so critical, particularly when you're working with these young adults, 24 and older, that are incarcerated. And what evidence-based research tells us is that yes, employment helps, but employment alone does not solve the reentry dilemma. And we're going to talk about that and the work that you're doing. Also, that without consistency and structure, returnees will fail. Again, that's part of the program design and the things that we're looking to you to do in your program design, making sure you have not only soft skills, but life skills that teach individuals how to fail forward, not only just to make progress in what you're doing, but when you get to that stumbling block or when you get to that situation, how do you fail forward? And we want to make sure that you include this in to address that reality. And there's a study that found that concentrating former prisoners in the same neighborhood leads to significantly higher percentages of recidivism. And what we're saying is that this grant is designed for individuals who come from lower income, high crime, high poverty neighborhoods. And those are the neighborhoods they're going to go back to. So what is your program thinking about in terms of working with them when they go back to these neighborhoods? This is a study, the study suggests that the environment plays a major role in criminal outcomes. And so one of the webinars that Coffee will be offering is the role of the family and the role of the community in the successful return of the individuals that we're seeking to serve and we're seeking to address. So let's talk about some facts. Now, we talked about the legislation. Let's talk about some facts. In 1972, the jail and prison population was less than 200,000 in the United States. Today, it is 2.2 million individuals are incarcerated. Part of this is a result of, in the 90s, lawmakers campaigned to get tough on crime. And America built a new prison every 2 weeks. I should say opened a new prison every 2 weeks, and still could not meet the demand for the prison beds. And remember, the 3 strikes you're out. And the 3 strikes you're out really impacted neighborhoods of people of color, because those crimes were low-level crimes, but it did not matter whether you were selling marijuana or committing manslaughter. 3 times, 3 strikes, you were out. If you had gone to prison 3 times, regardless of the severity, that was it. You were going to be there forever. This campaign on the part of state senators, on the part of even presidential campaigns, were focused on get tough on crime. And so in order to please the public, that became a cry, and it also became a mantra that resulted in higher incarceration. So while we only have 5% of the world's population, we have nearly 25% of its prison population. And we incarcerate more citizens than any other nation in the world. When I was working for public-private ventures, we had a contingency from London come over to learn how to deal with the incarcerated population and them coming back, United Kingdom. And at that time, and this was early 2000, they had a prison population in the country of 6,000 individuals. And they thought that they had a tremendous problem with incarcerated individuals. Now, understand that their system is different than ours. And when you're incarcerated, they take care of your family. So it's almost like you go to prison and your family gets on welfare, or their form of welfare. They provide social services to take care of your family while you're incarcerated. And so to them, that amount of people in prison was a big cost on their budget. So again, but they thought that they had a problem until we took them to prisons where they saw what the prison population was really like. So we took them to a prison in Texas where they were lifers, and it's the actual prison where they execute people. And they thought we were the most barbaric people in the world. Like after that, they wanted to go see one, and that was the one that was suggested, and it was in Texas. And then after they actually visited, on the way back on the bus back to Houston, the conversation, you would have thought, I felt so bad because they talked so bad about America and what we were doing. And it was horrible. It was really a horrible situation. I wound up standing out in the yard because they were talking about executing people like they were talking about the weather. This is the room that we do it in, and the family of the victim sits on this side, and the family of the person committing the crimes. I mean, that was the kind of atmosphere that they were witnessing. And it was just, and they had executed someone the night before. So to me, you could still smell the stench. And so I just couldn't take it. So I had to go out into the yard, and I'd rather risk my life out there than to stand there and have them talk so flippantly about executing someone. Some more facts. Private prisons operated by for-profit corporations multiplied from 5 in 1998 to 100 in 2008. That number has tripled under from 2008 until 2016. It was 0 because they were all stopped in the federal level, but then it increased once again. So under President Obama's administration, the Bureau of Prisons canceled all contracts with private prisons that housed federal offenders. And this was overturned in 2017, and private prisons were reestablished. So let's talk about what is reentry. There's a couple of points up there. The process by which prisoners return to the community, individual has been under some type of correctional supervision, and they begin to make a life for themselves, developing or starting a new life, a revolving door, all of the above, none of the above, or other. So we don't have a poll, but if we could have you type in the chat box, which one of these, what is reentry to you? Reentry focuses on individuals coming back into the community from some form of justice involvement. And the key aspect of this is to think about what it means to you, because you are the one that will be determining what that looks like to the individuals that come into your program. And so if you focus on reentry, does that mean that the individual reintegrates back into society or not? I use reintegration, and you'll see why as we go forward. But when you went to high school or when you went to college, you wanted to fit in, you wanted to be a part of the group, not necessarily attract any additional attention to yourself. You wanted to be reintegrated into that college environment. You want to be, when you go and you start a new job, you want to become part of the team. And so one of the things that I think is really important is we have to think about what it looks like to us versus what it looks like to the individual that is coming out. And Teresa Hodges, who was formerly incarcerated, she did a TED Talk, and she said that we have actually made coming home from prison entirely too hard. And I want you to think about that as you think about your program that we have for the conversation. So I'm going to show you this picture, and I'm going to ask you what door reflects your program. And so we say the door at the top, here's my arrow. Let's call this A. The one that says, sorry, we're closed is B. The one on the bottom left says the door slightly open, and then D would be the revolving door. What door do you think reflects your program, and what door do you think your client will see or your participant will see when they come out of prison? What do you foresee them thinking about when they think about your program and they come out, or when they think about coming out of prison? That the door is going to be open, it's going to be bright and sunny. The door is going to be closed with a sign that says, sorry, we're closed. They're walking out into the unknown, or they're going to recidivate and come back in like a revolving door. So we talked about reentry, and I talk about reintegration. Reentry is a noun. It's the action or process of reentering something. And reintegration is also a noun. It's the action or process of elements regarded as disparate to unity, the action or process of integrating someone or something back into society. When you think about reentry, and this is one of the reasons why I think I like reintegration better, is back in the day during the space program. I don't know how old anybody is on this, but there was a space program, an active space program, and the focus of the scientists was not just the launch of the rocket, the missile that was going into space and going into orbit, but it was also on the successful re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. And they knew that if anything was off, and as that rocket, the satellite or the rocket was coming back into the Earth's atmosphere, if anything was not in alignment, that would burn up. And everything that they had set out to do would be destroyed. Not only those astronauts that were on the spaceship, but all of the data that they had collected to do the research would also be destroyed. And so their focus was not just, as I said, on the launch, but how successful was the re-entry. And I can tell you that there were some critical situations where we lost individuals coming back and information coming back in because they burnt up on the re-entry back into the Earth's atmosphere. And so when we think about it, I use analogies a lot, but when we think about that, that's one situation. Soldiers that go out to fight wars, when they come back, they have to go through the process of reintegrating back into the civil society because they've been taken from 20, 21-year-old, taken out of regular home environment, and they go off to war where they're taught and trained how to fight a war. When they come back, they have to be reintegrated back into the civil society and not think of it. And so you hear post-traumatic stress syndrome, etc. The individuals that you're working with and will be working with, when they come out, will be coming out of a post-traumatic stress environment into society. And so how, thinking about your program now and thinking about case managers, how you're going to be working with these individuals, you've got to think about what trauma did they experience being locked up in a cell, being told what to do for however many years or months that they were in prison. And now you're getting them back, they're coming back out, and part of your process that you're going to have to do is to deal with what was their life, what was that institution look like? And you have to decide whether it's going to be, are we going to re-enter, do re-entry, or are we going to do reintegration, or are we going to do a combination of both? And Sue, I'm going to say her name wrong, but Cass Tesson is the founder and director of Fair Shake. And she says that reentry is not a one-size-fits-all uniform transition. What works is different for each unique individual. You all have been given a number of, I know 100, two of you have 100, another has 200 individuals that you have to serve. That's individuals with all of them having unique personalities, unique needs. And your program is not the design, is designed as an umbrella program for all of them. How you distinguish between what some needs are and others is totally different. So we've talked about what those implicit biases are. We now have to talk about what do we do, knowing that we have a program design that individuals have to fit in. Individuals are not this, you cannot have a cookie cutter approach. You have to have a generic approach that then can be adapted. So it's like when you're using cookies as an example. Everybody doesn't like chocolate chips. Some people like sugar cookies. Some people like almond cookies, whatever it is, but you're providing whatever that dessert is. Do you supply the dessert for everybody's needs, or do you come up with, I'm going to make a plain cookie and you can add to it whatever it is that you need to make it work for you? So remember that while reentry is not a one size that fits all, also you have one program, and then how do you adapt that? And that's going to be part of your policies and procedures manual to make sure that everybody is having access to the same opportunities, having access to the same incentives, having access to the same requirements and disciplinary requirements and all of those things. You've got to make sure that you show non-bias, but as you're doing this, you want to be in tune to what it is that the individuals are needing, because your program is just one of many. So we talk about program design. Does everybody know what DOL requires in this grant? What's the requirement? What's the eligibility requirements? What's the recruitment and outreach requirements? Everybody knows what the FOA says. But we want to begin with the end in mind. So I want everybody, and this works better when I'm in person, but I want everybody to close your eyes, and I want you to think about what you want as an individual, whatever your role is, with everyone who leaves your program to be doing. What does it look like? How can you help them get there? Think about the end. What's the end sum game of this person coming into your program? So I'm going to give you a scenario. 27-year-old African-American male returning to North Philadelphia, has one child, not married, high school graduate, some college. Before he got in trouble, he was a bank teller. They don't have those anymore, but he worked in a bank. What is in your mind? Begin with the end in mind. What is it that you want this person to walk away from your program? How do you want this person to walk away from your program? Think about it. Don't tell me about job readiness class. When he walks out the door, if he's finished your program, he's completed follow-up, what do you want this person to be like? What would you imagine him being like? Which one of these pictures do you want this person to be? Still working in fast food restaurants, working in construction, being a member of the union, college graduate, celebrating college graduation. Because one of my examples is this gentleman by the name of Mr. Avila. He's the founder and CEO of Clean Decision, and he was formerly incarcerated, and he was part of this organization called Unlock Futures Free America. It's John Legend founded, And he spoke about that when he was released, he became what his community showed him. So it wasn't doctors and lawyers or people getting up every day to go to work. It was drug dealers and hustlers and pimps, etc. He founded a janitorial service. So the entrepreneurship of that is great. And thank you for sharing that with us, because it's a picture of someone cleaning, but if you're owning a cleaning company, that's something totally different. Well, I want you all to start thinking about, what do you want these people to be when they come out? What do you want them to do? You know, it's the conversation that your parents had with you or somebody that looked out for you. It's like, I think you have the potential to be X, Y, and Z. So I want y'all to think beyond what the requirements of the grant is and what is the strength of the people that you're going to be working with. Your program elements right now, we know that DOL is requiring that you do assessments and that you have a variety of partners to meet a variety of needs. The assessments of criminogenic, education, trauma, cognitive behavior, adverse childhood experiences. These are the kinds of assessments that you would look for. Your program also needs to be holistic and address the needs of the individual, Maslow's law, and what the perceived wants are versus the realistic needs. If someone comes up to you and says, you assess them and they only have a 5th grade education, but their goal is to be a doctor, your program is for 3 years. What is realistic and obtainable for that individual? Doesn't say that he or she can't be a doctor, but what can you work with and set realistic objectives so that they don't feel like they failed? The other element in your program, it has to be culturally adept. You have to speak the language of individuals that have been institutionalized and have come out and is seeking your help. So you can't have a conversation with them talking about physics or, unless they've been in the science fields, but you want to make sure you're culturally adept, understanding and respecting the cultures that the individuals are coming from. So all of these items are program element items that you need to look at. Some basic items and basic elements that you need to look at release is that when you come out of institutions, there is a shock. We talked about PTSD with soldiers coming out. It's also PTSD coming out of incarceration, particularly if you're working in prisons where individuals have been in prison for a period of time that are now coming out. There is a website, it's on the bottom of this slide, fairshake.net. It was developed it's a free resource. Please, please, please go to that website. It will give you some great insight, not only in program design. They have toolkits that you can download. It is not the fanciest website that you will see. It's not the most attractive website that you can see, but it is a website that is definitely designed for individuals that are working with individuals who are coming out of incarceration. I briefly talked about Maslow's law. An individual that's coming out of prison, these are the basic things that they're going to be looking for. Everybody tells you they want a job, but they need food, they need housing, they need money, they need supportive services, whether it's mental health, physical health, they need support. And so how your program interprets this needs to be part of what's going to happen in the first 21 days. They come out of prison, if they've been on medicine, they're going to need their medicine. Where do they get the money to go to the pharmacy to buy the medicine? Where's the pharmacy? How do they use technology? But the basic things that we all need as human beings, whether we've been in prison or not, is food, shelter, money, services to support us. These are the things that your program has to have at the basic core of what it is that you're going to offer. And, everybody's like, okay, we're going to get them in a job readiness class. But if I'm sleeping in a shelter and changing from night to night and don't have a place to shower, you're not going to get me ready for a job. It sounds great, but you're not going to get me ready for a job, because in the back of my mind is, where am I going to sleep tonight? And I'm sitting in a classroom with other individuals. If we went from a virtual standpoint and I'm smelling, then, people are going to be cracking on me. They're going to be saying jokes, whatever. I'm not going to want to come back. If we do it virtually, I don't have a cell phone. I don't have access to the internet. So how am I going to sit in your training class? We got to look at the basic elements as opposed to just the elements that we want to do because we wrote that in the grant. some essential elements is cultural competency. You have to understand the environment of coming out of institutionals. So these institutions and the cultural competency, and I will be doing a webinar on this, credible messengers. Who's delivering the message about your program? Who's delivering the message about staying out of prison? Who's delivering the message about what happened to you in prison and how do you overcome that? Who's going to be that credible messenger? That not someone that's reading it out of a book, but somebody that can interpret that for you so that you can help me understand why I need to go on the straight and narrow, why I can't hang out after a certain time, why it's important that I go, excuse me, meet with my PO. All of those things, who's delivering that message? You also have to help them with inside out thinking. What does that mean? Like, you've got a different mindset. I acted one way in prison. I received and responded one way in prison. Now I'm out of prison. I don't have that shelter. I don't have the 3 hots in a cot. I got to fend for myself right now. How am I going to think? I'm used to people telling me what to do. Now I've got to make my own decisions. Yes, we all get excited. I mean, I remember when I became an adult and my mother couldn't tell me anything, quote unquote, until I realized I didn't know everything. And that's the same thing. You know, I can't wait to get out, and then I get out and I don't know what to do. So I need some help, y'all. And that's what they're going to be expecting. What help can you still give them? Don't talk to me right now about sitting in a class and getting an industry recognized credential until you can help me sort out my thinking. Fairshake.net has a lot of information on that. Those that are in, have worked with individuals that have been in federal prisons, and some state prisons have started doing the curriculum Thinking for a Change. I believe Chester did it years ago. I don't know if they're still doing it, but this is a 12-week course that individuals have gone through on cognitive behavior thinking. Another element to look at is, what's the school of life? What's the reality of a returnee? Is that person being discharged and they're going to be couch surfing? Is that person being discharged and they have 3 children by 3 different people? What does freedom look like? Freedom is not necessarily free. So freedom versus free. I'm out of the physical building of a prison, but I still have correctional supervision. I have collateral consequences that keep me from moving forward in certain trainings and certain jobs that I can take, certain licenses that I can get. And that's a whole nother workshop on collateral consequences. There are tens of thousands of collateral consequences that you will need to know for your area. You don't need to know tens of thousands. You just need to know what you're planning on doing. Is that doable? It is part of the FOA. The FOA tells you that your training and your employment partners must be able for your individuals to be able to get jobs and licenses. And then there's some transition tips. What is it like to tell individuals, don't be late for your first PO meeting. Make sure you're on time. Make sure you're taking your meds. Make sure you go to a clinic. All of these things are part of that transition. And these are essential elements should be essential elements in your programming. Any comments, any questions?
This is Giovanna again from Chester County.
Mhm.
And like everything that you're saying is making sense, but even as I'm thinking, I know one thing that comes up often is just accessing more credentials that can actually be life-changing to our participants. Like, I know we offer a few basic ones, and then in Pennsylvania, we also partner with our Career Link, that's kind of like our workforce hub. But the way that they have things set up is they designate the most funding to industries that they feel or have done research on that are like some of the highest, but those aren't always like, those industries don't correlate directly with reentry. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on like how to navigate that, or just connecting individuals to more, I guess, better trainings that can change their life, considering funding.
I have a lot of comments on that, but
Yeah.
let me just start with the basics. I think, first of all, you have to look at what OIC said that they were going to provide. OIC committed to the Department of Labor that they were going to provide training in 4 different areas. Katie, I don't know if you have all of those off the top of your head, But that's the first thing. So what did they say that they were going to provide? Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that you can't provide additional trainings that would fit the needs of the individual. You are so correct about career links. They can be a really great partner because they can provide services for you that you don't have to pay for and services for the individual. But then you have to overlay that with what does the labor market say, and what does the labor market say will be the jobs that are available coming up in the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And then what is the training that those individuals that you're going to be working with will need to meet those. Then you've got to overlay that on top of what are they legally allowed to work in or not. For instance, in New Jersey, individuals may pass the real estate license test, but depending on the level of their crime, cannot be real estate sales agents for 7 to 10 years. Even if they ace the test, they cannot be a real estate. So you wouldn't want to put somebody in a real estate training class knowing that they would not be able to be a real estate agent. Might be the top salesperson, know everything. So what we want to do, and as your coach, I'll work with you on this, is here's what OIC of America said they were going to do. What are the job opportunities in those areas? Here's as you start working and you see the skill sets of the individuals that you're working with, you see the things that they would like to do. Let's overlay that on top of what OIC said and see what that trend is. And then work into that. Is it realistic that they will be allowed to work in those professions? So it's like a 3-pronged approach to doing that. And then how can you, because then how can you tie in the career links to help you navigate that with the training? Okay, so we'll talk about that. As a matter of fact, SEI Chester is part of my presentation tomorrow. All right, so School of Life, cultural competency, transition tips. And again, this is high level. As we go through it and I work with the team, we'll figure out where we need to drill down in even deeper, and we'll have additional opportunities to have these discussions in more depth. Cultural competency, as I stated, and collateral consequences are 2 separate workshops that Coffee provides. I'm actually the facilitator for both of them, but and we go into deeper depth about it. So in essence, we want to make sure that everything that y'all are doing is a managed network for reintegration. You're going to be working with parole and probation, mental and physical health, employment, recidivism, housing, family, and outside influences. This is going to be key and should be key as you design your program and as you design your client flow. All these things have to be taken into consideration. Everyone is not going to earn a high school diploma, a GED, or industry recognized credential. And that's fact. That is the reality of the situation. Skills training that provides meaningful employment is key to moving someone out of poverty and into a life that will prevent them and keep them from going back into a life of crime. Respectable wages that ends the cycle of incarceration. There are families who have generational incarceration, the father, the grandfather, and now the person that you're dealing with. What will stop that cycle is respectable wages, someone that can take care of their family. In Houston, Texas, with the Ready for Work program, they designed where in Texas, anybody know anything about Texas, you need a car. You're not getting on a bus in Texas in 107-degree weather, and the buses run every 2 or 3 hours. So what they did in the program called Moving Forward was if the individual completed the program's initial training, got a job, worked on the job for 3 months, was able to save $500 and qualified to get car insurance, they had a partnership with a used car dealer that would sell the individual a car and work with that individual. It raised the participation retention rate tremendously in that particular program in Texas. And it also, because it gave the men, especially the men in the program, a sense of manliness, manhood. I don't know what the exact word is, but it was respectable, and it was something that people didn't see them standing on the bus stop trying to go to work. they literally had a sense of pride that kept them engaged in the program. And their retention rate for their participants in the program was over 90%. But they thought about what's the need for these individuals. And it's not just employment, it's respectable wages. It was skills training that gave them meaningful employment. What's the sustainable support services that fill the gaps that's missing, whether it is housing, whether it is a relationship? How do I navigate the relationships with individuals that were broken while I was incarcerated? And most importantly, and I think the most important thing is meaningful relationships. Nothing is more critical to any of us than having relationships that are established on mutual respect and mutual belief. And I think that as I think about this, I encourage you that when you look at the things that you are offering, take into consideration where these trainings, the prescribed trainings that you selected or that you told DOL you're going to do, whether it's your case management, and we're going to talk about case management behind the prisons. There's a curriculum that Ventura County called the Con Game. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. When you look at your program and the relationships that you're establishing, does it reflect the respect for the individual so that they can become a longstanding member in their community and be returned back to? So when somebody's walking down the block, the person's not pointing the finger at them saying, oh, there's that bum, you know, he sold crack, cocaine to my nephew, and now my nephew is addicted, blah, but that they can walk down that block, they can be in that neighborhood, and they can be seen as a valuable member of that neighborhood. So I challenge you all to go back, if you haven't completed it, to go back and rethink some of your program redesign to make sure some of these essential elements, if they're not in your program design, that you do a redesign and incorporate them into your program so that you are hitting not only the benchmarks for DOL, but you're also hitting and making sure that the individuals that you're serving are going to feel proud to be a part of your program. They're going to see your program as a means to an end, that they're going to recognize and know that you respect them for who they are and not for what they've done, and that you can look at them and ask them what they need and be that conduit for them to receive it. That's all part of your program. And it comes down to, again, beginning with the end in mind. What do you want that individual to feel like when they leave your program? What do you want them to know that they are capable of doing when they leave your program? What do you want to show them in terms of how to fail forward? Because we all fail. I know that I have experienced failure in my life, and the way that you process it is the difference between whether you fall and look up or you fall and you stay down. So to me, there are lots of people that fail. Okay, Bill Gates failed. Einstein failed. I mean, you know, Oprah Winfrey failed. There are tons of people that have had this experience of failure in your life. For those of you who know basketball, Steph Curry was a better golfer than he was a basketball player. And then he became a basketball player. So, you know, there are people that we see, and not that we idolize them, but they're people we look at and we say, wow, look at what they're doing. Well, even Hank Aaron said people talked about how many home runs that he made, but nobody talked about how many strikes he had or how many foul balls he had. So you got to understand that to get to that success, you are going to have to fail. How do we take individuals who have been told that they'll never amount to anything, you're no good, those kinds of things, those kinds of words that might have caused them to feel the way that they feel and have gotten them into that trouble? How do we teach them that they're more than the worst thing that they've ever done, and teach them how to fail forward? And that will be the definition of a successful reentry program that you have put forth with OIC. And we also want to make sure that as part of that, advocacy, you cannot advocate with federal dollars. That doesn't mean that your faith-based and community-based partners can't advocate for criminal justice reform, for minimum sentencing. You want to tell your story and the impact on your community. That's advocacy without being an advocate out there. You're going to identify a champion in your community that's going to go tell the story for you and give you further funding. You want to identify that person that can speak your language to people that are looking to see what it is that OIC is doing to give, I think Marvin said it, to give opportunities to everyone. And you want to educate your participants, your clients, their inner circles. They can be advocates for you. They can be advocates for you. They can be advocates for your program. They can be advocates for themselves. All right? Disenfranchisement, the right to vote, since we're in an election, the right to vote, those kinds of things, housing, to be able to find a decent house. You should not be limited to where you live just because you made that mistake. So you want to also include some type of advocacy in the work that you've done. Legal services, alternative sentencing, cash bail, certificates of relief. You are working with people that are coming out of prison. Certificates of relief are excellent tools for you to use, particularly for individuals as they go to look for a job. Expungement, trying to get some of these charges off of their record. We talked about elimination of mandatory minimums, and then ultimate is a pardon, which is harder, but it is final. And once that person is pardoned. Finally, just to summarize, you want to begin with the end in mind. You want to recognize and remove implicit biases in yourself as well as others that you are going to be working with. You want to avoid the cookie cutter approach. You want to make sure you incorporate a mentor or a coach or a partner to work with the individuals. You want to learn more about the fail forward philosophy. You want to have multiple and many celebrations and recognition. And you want to have effective and continuous follow-up. Any questions?
We are giving them training that they will receive a certification for, but what then when job opportunities are just not there? Great question, Rosalind.
That is a great question. And I think, again, if we look at, what the end result is, you want to make sure that you understand what the labor market is looking for. You want to make sure that when you're sending individuals out on looking for job opportunities, that those opportunities really exist. It takes a lot of work. I can tell you that it takes a lot of work. You have to be really, really creative. In Philadelphia, when I was working for the mayor, we had a Roots to Reentry program that was a horticulture landscaping program that was done with the Philadelphia Horticulture Society. We had, I can't remember the name, I just went out of my head. We had a program where they took rescue dogs and worked with the rescue dogs. And those individuals that completed that training, and the dogs actually lived with them, stayed with them in the prison. Obviously, these were individuals that were in work release. And those gentlemen, when they came out, they were able to get jobs with the ASPCA. They were able to get jobs with PetSmart. I can't remember the other pet store. But they were able to get those kinds of jobs. The individuals that worked in Roots to Reentry and landscaping, they were able to get jobs with landscaping companies. All of these commercial buildings, all of these hospitals, all of the universities hire landscaping companies to take care of their grounds. So it's what are the needs that are out there? What are the needs that are maybe not as obvious? I can't remember the person that looked at the janitor and talked about owning your own janitorial services. Looking at what are some of the trainings that you can offer and how those trainings can be interpreted in more than one way. It's just how do I say this? You got to think outside the box. That's probably the easiest way to say this. You really have to think outside of the box. And so it's not impossible. It just takes more work than looking at, okay, well, we're going to train them how to be in cabling and how to do fiber optics. And then all you look at is Comcast. Well, you've got to, and again, I had this conversation, you've got to look at who else needs wiring services. New construction is happening every day. All of those buildings are being wired and sold because they're already equipped with wireless X, Y, and Z. So, we need to work on where are the jobs, or let's create some jobs based on the skill sets that the individuals are bringing to the program. Tomorrow, as stated, I've been asked to walk through I'm calling it from behind the bars to the boardroom, but how to work effectively in the prison environment. I'm looking forward to sharing that information with you, and also particularly getting you prepared for tomorrow. Hopefully getting you prepared for going into this new grant type and working behind the prisons. We're gonna talk about some strategies. We're gonna talk about some challenges, and some of the things that you probably are not even thinking about. But I look forward to sharing that with you tomorrow.
Thank you, Carolyn. That was fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.